Welcome to Everything Life Coaching. I'm John Kim.
And I'm Noelle Cordeaux. We are the founders of JRNI Coaching.
We're super passionate about all things coaching and want to share what we've learned from over a decade of coaching and training over 1,000 life coaches.
Dive deep into a more meaningful career, find freedom, and make an impact.
On today's episode, we're going to talk about how to throw out the blueprint, stop living the life others expect of you, and find your own way. And what better topic with everything that's going on in the world today. With me this morning, like always, is Fancy Mustard.
Hello.
You know what I am? I'm cheap ketchup, and you are Fancy Mustard.
And delicious together, nonetheless.
Yeah, exactly. But nothing describes us more than cheap ketchup and fancy mustard.
Yeah, I agree. I love that.
We also now have our Halloween costumes for maybe next year.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect. And hopefully we can travel and I will join you in LA.
yeah, absolutely. So blueprints, I use this word a lot, and I think it's such a great topic with what's happening, the whole just the shake up and a lot of people creating new blueprints these days.
Yeah, and it's interesting from the perspective of almost 12 years now working as a coach because I take a lot of the concepts around life design, around living for yourself, around saying no to limiting beliefs, the voices of others. I take that stuff for granted. And I've been really humbled recently to speak to a lot of people that when I've broached the topic of life design, I've heard that that's an unfamiliar term, that it's a radical concept, that the power of the status quo, other people's opinions, quote unquote, the way things are and or should be is still really heavy and really powerful for a lot of folks out there.
Yeah, it's baked in.
What do you make of that, especially living in this time when things are so gooey and flexible?
Yeah, well, first of all, when you say life design, for people who have not heard that term, can you give us just a brief description of what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's literal. Designing your life, waking up in the morning and saying, what do I want? Do I want
Hmm.
coffee? Do I want Cheerios? Do I want orange juice? And as you move through your day, being really intentional with your energy, how you want to feel, what you want to do, say, create, and then from a contextual perspective, that bridges out to the idea of the blueprint of if I had a blank slate, if I accepted fully that I am the author of my existence, what story would I write?
Mm,
And then moving forward into the great expanse to do just that.
yeah, so I'm old enough where I have tried both ways of living. So the first one is the blueprint, which is a lot of shoulds I used to live with that, some of them passed down from parents, some of them passed down from society, advertising and commercials, and also growing up in LA, there's a lot of shoulds here. So it made me very hollow. I was chasing a lot of things and I was very disconnected with self because I never was able to trace those blueprints. They were things that were made up by society. There was a lot of ticking clocks, right? Like when you should get married, when you should have kids, all of that. And then also, having old school Korean parents who's always telling me, you should do this, whether it's go to school, get married, have a house, like all these things. And so a lot of that disconnected me from me. And then this new way of living, which I think many are doing now, this idea of designing your life, this idea of getting up, checking in with yourself, your body, what you need, mindfulness, meditation, standing on your truth, having the ability to say no, like all of that. Um, I started doing that after my divorce, and I gotta say, um, I feel like with the first one, I was a saltwater fish in a fishbowl, freshwater fishbowl with dirty, dirty water that needed to be
Mm.
changed. And then today, living a life where I try to design it each day, I feel like I'm in the ocean swimming, finding Nemo.
Yeah, and so I think so much of what you said is really important to unpack. So, we're talking about how do we end up with a blueprint that's not ours?
Hmm.
And the crushing power of expectation based on where you live, where you grew up, the society around you that impacts what you think you can do with your time, and then the lens of family. Those are
Right.
2 incredibly powerful, 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 um, blueprints that get handed to people.
Hmm.
And it comes from not so much with the culture of, the city or the place where you grew up, but especially from your family, it comes from love. So much of what is designed in society in terms of blueprint is designed to keep us safe. And the ideas of safety that get passed down from generation to generation, from person to person, from neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend, like, do this, it'll be good for you.
Hmm.
Do this, it'll make your life XYZ. So when we talk about swimming out into the ocean, if somebody's not ready to even open their eyes and realize that they're in a fishbowl, not an ocean, the idea of pushing out into the world can be downright terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not used to it. We've never swam past, what we see, what we know, and as humans, we gravitate toward homeostasis, and so
Mhm.
to actually uh, get comfortable with the uncomfortable, to lean into fear, to color outside the lines, all of that is terrifying.
It is terrifying, and, one of the things that I see popping up that has kinda looped me into where a lot of folks are at is just the idea of having conversations, of
Hmm.
saying hard things out loud to your partner, to your family, like, just
Yeah.
starting there. Like, if you have something, if you have a thought, a belief, a view that is different from your partner or from your family, it's really hard to get that out of your mouth.
Yeah, of course, because there's going to be judgment, there's going to be pushback. You may have friends that are no longer interested in your friendship
Mhm.
because you decide to swim in the ocean.
This stuff takes bravery, and it takes a little bit of grit, and it takes a lot of work, but the antidote is kind of slow, peaceful movement and noticing.
I love this idea that there's power when you don't name what you really want.
Mm.
That goes against everything that, I was taught growing up, that, you do see what you want, and it's very specific and it's narrow, but I learned that when you're just chasing after that, you don't leave a lot of room for magic and miracles, and then what I've learned is that sometimes you do get what you want, but you don't know that you got it because it doesn't look like what you wanted, but you know you're there because you feel it.
Very much so. Yeah, and that's, and when we're talking about the blueprint, when we're talking about, life designs, that's one of the most confusing things in coaching from a goal setting perspective. What we know from goal setting theory is that a properly set goal lives just beyond the scope of what you can imagine.
Right, it's the same recipe as, a flow state, in that when you want to get into a flow state, it you're going to a place where there is challenge, and you're pushing yourself, just enough where you are challenged, but not enough where it's impossible. Not enough where you're gonna, be so afraid you're not gonna, go there. So, um, I love what you just said, where it's just enough where, it's pulling you. There's motivation.
And sometimes your motivation is to not no longer experience the place where you're at,
Hmm.
where you don't know what's on the other side of the fishbowl, but you don't want to be in there anymore.
I never thought in a million years, because I grew up in LA and I know every city like the back of my hand. I never thought in a million years that I would be living in Altadena. Growing up, the vision I had was the Hollywood Hills, and that was where all the successful people lived. And today at 47, I have a little ranch style house in Altadena with a couple chickens, and it's nothing like I would have ever imagined as a goal. But here I am. But the feeling I have so much peace up here, and it fits, and it feels very honest to me where I'm at in my life. And this is a good example of what we're talking about.
Oh, very much so. 100%. And so, there are different steps to going through this work. And the first one is what you described as when you were younger, being subject to kind of the rules of LA, being
Hmm.
subject to the rules of your family, being subject to a dominant culture.
Right.
That's when you're stuck. That's when you're not living your life. And then from there, we move to a position of being able to observe and
Hmm.
say, "Oh, wow, you know, there's a whole big world out there, and maybe, just maybe, there's something beyond what I've told myself I must accept for my life." And making that jump is tricky. And how do you know if you're subject? How do you know if you're observing? And something that I've been reading a lot about recently is cues and tells with dominant culture. So if you ever bump up against a situation where somebody's telling you, everybody knows this, or everybody does that, or this is the right way to go, and this is the wrong way to do things. Whenever you get into absolute land, that's when you should start immediately asking questions.
Well, because absolute closes things very fast, right? There
Mhm.
suddenly there's a fence.
Exactly, and then when you
Yeah.
move into the state of observer, you're like, "Oh, there's a fence, and
Yeah.
there's another side of the fence, and there's
Right.
a
Let's
forest
hop it.
beyond that." And yeah,
Right.
let's hop it, let's move. Well, actually, when you hop the fence, that's when you go to the 3rd level, and that's when you're a
Design.
designer.
Yeah.
So, from a conscious perspective, the stages are being stuck, being subject, accepting the world around you, then moving to being able to observe the world around you and start asking questions about it, and then getting really, really, really brave and trying to move the pieces of your life around to fashion exactly what you want.
Yeah, and this reminds me of the hero's journey, starting with your environment, what's comfortable, and that's a subject, getting the call to action, and then, of course, slaying dragons and kind of coming full circle to the village, but changed. I love that it has that. It's almost a circle to me. A subject, and then observer, and then you becoming the designer.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a beautiful process,
Yeah.
and it's not all rainbows and unicorns, and I
Yeah,
think
it's
that's
not
one of the
easy.
no.
It sounds
It's
really easy.
it sounds super easy, but, just as I said, like, just think about how hard it is to say, "I disagree with you" out loud to somebody that you love. Like, actually hopping the fence is really fucking hard. And so it takes grit, and it takes determination, and it takes choosing yourself. And we've all been beaten into submission of the sacrifice of the self, right? Like, that's selfish. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. How has your relationship changed, or have you had a sense of like what this has been like for you as you've moved through the different spaces?
Yeah, the other thing this reminds me of is, 2 words, powerless and power-filled. So, when I was in the subject phase, when I was taking on other people's, blueprints, truth, their wants, like my parents, I was very powerless. And then, observing that there is more, actively hopping the fence, and then starting to design a life. Yes, there's pushback, and yes, people may get angry and not want to be your friend, and all of that. But on that side, as you start to design your life, now you're power filled,
Mhm.
and I mean, that to me, that's a difference between existing and living.
Mhm. Very, yeah. And to me, when you say power filled, I think of freedom.
Yes, well, yeah. I mean, ultimately, that is the North Star. That is freedom is the to me that to me that is success. Freedom, whatever that means to you.
Whatever that means to you. And you're super right that the end state never ever ever looks like you thought it would be.
Right, right.
I talked to a friend yesterday that I haven't talked to in a couple of years, and he knows that I jumped out of the matrix. I left my PhD, I left academia, I left the status quo, and struck out into the world to build our funky little company. And he said to me, "My God, you must be living the dream, like you love it, right?" And I was like, "Well."
Sometimes,
I was like, I do. Like, I
right.
do have, absolute freedom in my life, but, most days I wouldn't wake up and say, "I am having fun." Like, it's
Yeah, of
really,
course.
really hard work to chase,
Absolutely.
maintain, and enact freedom. And so, but would I choose it again and again? 100%.
Yeah, I
100%.
mean, when we think of freedom, we just think of, like, running wildly, in the fields and not doing anything and taking long naps and I don't know, but that isn't what freedom looks like. I mean, yes, you have freedom and you are empowered, but you're also we have schedules and we have obligations and responsibilities and, of course, with you running a company, things like, a million emails.
Yeah, a million emails, legal,
Right,
contracts,
right.
responsibility to self and others. And so, when you're swapping out somebody else's blueprint for your own, the major difference is that you become accountable to yourself.
Yeah, yeah, but you do have freedom in the sense that, it's a capital F in that, you are your own boss, you make your own choices and you can ultimately, design your own life.
Yes. So this is a question for you. Um, Given that we're both kind of experienced in life design and we've jumped into the deep end of the swimming pool and are still swimming, um, if I told you at this exact moment in time, whatever you do next, you cannot fail,
Mm.
what would you do?
First of all, we are in an ocean, Noel, not a swimming pool. Yeah. You jumped to the subject instead of the designer. Um, if I could not fail, what would I do? Um I would love, to do something on the television or radio platform, so I don't know what that looks like, it does terrify me because, I know with something like TV, it could also ruin your life, especially if there's cameras in your face and you could actually lose freedom, right? So, but I feel like those are platforms that I haven't played with. I would love to be creative on those platforms, and I think they would help me, ultimately reach more people, which is, my ultimate goal and keep creating a dialogue about all the things that, that move me.
Awesome. Awesome. And one of the things that I thought was wonderful about your response is that it terrifies you.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
If your goals don't terrify you, try harder
Or pick new goals, huh?
or pick new goals. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes my goal is to have a bagel. Um,
Right.
and and
Right.
and that's a perfectly acceptable goal and it fits into life design. But what's that bagel going to do? It's going to fuel me to accomplish my dreams. And so all of your choices leverage each other. And when we're thinking about life design, that's really the foundation is you are what you eat, you are what you consume, whether it's relational or media or food. And so what are you feeding yourself? How are you showing up in the world? And is that getting you where you need to go?
Yeah, and also the mindset's important,
Mhm.
and I think a big part of, life design is having a mindset where, uh, uh, you're feeding joy and excitement, versus scarcity. So, your mindset is that, there's no ceiling, anything is possible. It's a growth mindset instead of the fixed mindset where you feel like, there are limits, there are ceilings, you can only do so much, and all of that. Scarcity.
Oh, yeah, and scarcity is such a tricky bugger, um, because it's like a shapeshifter. That just in my own experience, times in my life when I've had very little, I've experienced the same levels of contentment and happiness as times when I've had more abundance. And
Mm.
so, what is the quality that actually creates happiness? Does it have to do with material gain? Does it have to do with stability? For me, that answer is no. It's everything to do with the people around me. If I'm around
Mm,
people that I love and want to be with, there's no such thing as scarcity, and we'll figure it out. I could be in a cardboard box.
right.
And so, I'd love to challenge everybody who's listening to really get clear with what is scarcity to you and how does it control you?
I used to have a very a scarcity mindset. I used to have a very fixed mindset, and it just it closed me off, and I think it created a giant ceiling where my potential was stunted because of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Potential, taking risk is
Hmm.
stunted by concepts of scarcity. Experimentation, moving, leaving your geographic place, leaving your job, leaving a relationship. All of those things are for so many folks controlled by these concepts of scarcity. So, and it's worthy of examination to be like, well, what's my baseline? Like, what do I really need at absolute baseline? And for a lot of people, it's really simple when you strip it all away. You need food, you need shelter, and you need love. And if you can access those things, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, yeah, and I think especially now because a lot of people are forced to go back to the basics, what they need, and for many, they're mentally collapsing because it feels like they don't have enough, even if they do.
And it feels like the feeling of not having enough, I think too, at least what I've been observing in the world around me, and I've been beating the tom toms for a really long time, like about social media and consumerism and how it kind of tricks you into
Hmm.
thinking these are the things that actually compose your life. And when you're stuck in your home with your significant other and all your stuff, are those things actually fulfilling? Are they? Does your snazzy toaster oven, does it give you a snuggle at night? And at what cost?
And I gotta say, the reason why Noel is fancy mustard and I am cheap ketchup is we are very different in many ways. I am a lot more materialistic than Noel, but those things like objects and I'm a car guy, I'm a gearhead, so cars, toys. Back in the day, I thought that is what it made me successful or made me valuable. My taste hasn't changed. Of course, I still like things, but they're the result of something. So like building a life with meaning, a sense of purpose, like what Noel is saying, surrounding yourself with kind and people who are going to support and champion your story. All of that is now um, the stuff that's really important to me. And then I think what ripples outward is things, money, security, other things that ripple from you living in that state.
Yes, I completely agree. And one, like, things are fun, that's what you're talking about is the approach of joy versus scarcity.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like motorcycles because I like them and they're fun,
right,
but
right.
you don't need a motorcycle in as an extension of your person to define your existence.
Right. Noelle would have 1 motorcycle, I would have, a collection.
I don't think I'd have any motorcycles. Let's be real.
Yeah.
Like
Noelle just needs a hiking stick and a compass, right? So another powerful question that you ask a lot is, what excuse will you give yourself at the end of your life if you never try? Which I think is it's almost a cold shower.
It is a cold shower. It is a cold shower. And in my coaching, something that I've been saying a lot to folks is you're going to die anyway. And my
Yeah,
clients think I'm really morbid, but it's really quite true.
yeah,
So when we're talking about satisfaction, when we're talking about happiness, when we're talking about contentment, I'm not talking about motorcycles. I'm talking about that moment where you're about to take your last breath and you're
mhm,
looking back over the entire course of your life? And are you saying to yourself, damn, that was fun?
mhm.
That was a
Yeah.
life well lived?
Yeah, and, if you're listening to this and you're 18, I don't know, but if you're listening to this and you're, say, my age, 47, a question like this really lands with me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, looking back over your life, you, John, might say like all of those motorcycles, totally, totally worth it. Right. Um, and that's awesome because you've designed your life in that way to
Mm,
accommodate that dream and have that fun and chase that joy and chase that excitement. What we know from end of life surveys, end of life research is that people never wish they had worked more. Um,
right.
People never wish they had, made more money. People at the end of their life looking back crave experiences and connections.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a fact, you know?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people who, have, climbed any ladder and has made a lot of wealth, if they're alone, if their relationships aren't meaningful, usually you hear stories of, how depressed and sad and it's like the money and their version of success, it actually doesn't mean anything, you know?
It doesn't. And, there's all of these things, going back to humans and how we exist in the world. If we're describing things that you're listening and you're thinking, "Oh, wow, well, I think that's really important." It's hate the system, not the human. We're all subject to this stuff just like everybody else. And so, as we're talking about this, as we're dismantling it, it really is the work of dismantling a lot of different things. So when we're thinking about urgency, when we're thinking about perfectionism, when we're thinking about money, um, the antidote is community. The antidote is slowing down. The antidote is accepting many perspectives. The antidote is, God, so many antidotes, but just really taking a look around and moving to observer and saying, instead of what do I need, what is lacking, what is.
Yeah, the observer, whenever I hear that, words like observing and curiosity, which before I thought was, um, silly and non-productive, today I feel it's the door into, um, acceptance. It's a door into, not being in panic or fight or flight. It's a door into gratitude. It's a door into, um, wanting what you already have. And I think when you're there, I mean, no one can take that kind of power away from you. Like that's like to me, that's like, reaching enlightenment.
It is very
Yeah.
much so, and there's stillness in that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, maybe we can end with this, and I love this because it also, kind of matches, what we talk about, in Journey, which is, um, the journey and the person you become along the way is the stuff that transforms you. It's not getting to the, end. It's the I always say that the gold coins are sprinkled throughout the rainbow. They're not in a pot at the end, and this is what I mean. It's the process there.
Oh, you're so right. And I think that's the big fallacy, right? Is that the goal, the representation, the manifestation of your journey is the end point. I was talking about this with a client yesterday. We were talking about relationships and how um, gaining a relationship has been set up in society as the end state. So think about every Disney movie you've ever seen. The entire plot is the guy getting the girl or the girl getting the guy, and then they get together and the movie ends. And then there's no highlight reel of the next 36 years. And so, thinking about it from that perspective, like what's your end game? What are you trying to gain? What are you trying to represent? What are you trying to design? And then every single moment, every single choice that you make that gets you closer to that actualized existence, that's the gold that's sprinkled throughout the rainbow. It's choosing yourself, choosing your own design over and over and over again.
Yeah, and it's a daily process, you know?
And a practice.
Yeah, absolutely. if you're listening to this and some of this stuff resonates with you, if you're listening to this and you want to have deeper conversations or even want to help people throw out their blueprints and you think that you would be powerful in that way, come check out JRNI Coaching. It's what we do.
It is, and there's so many others who are just totally hip on this work, and we'd love to have those conversations.
Yeah. Thank you for listening and be well. Thanks for listening to Everything Life Coaching. If you're feeling the draw to become a coach, head to jrni.co/everything to explore a new career that brings fulfillment, gives you a true sense of purpose, and a strong community to do it in. We created JRNI Coaching to equip you with the tools, training, and community you need to attain your goals.
Join JRNI Coaching and begin your journey towards personal freedom and a transformative state of growth today. That's jrni.co/everything.